Hey guys, tonight we explore how ancient Babylonians measured time by throwing a party in a shadow. You may not survive this. It's your choice. Let's go back in time. It's a scorching hot day in ancient Babylon. The sun is blazing, the heat is rising, and you're feeling pretty toasty yourself. Your to-do list is piling up, and it seems like the day just isn't long enough to tackle everything on it. But wait. Before you start stressing over your unfinished tasks, take a moment to look up at the sky. What do you see? A giant shadow creeping across the heavens? Is it a bird? Is it a plane? No, it's something even more fascinating. A giant shadow cast by an object that humans have been tracking for millennia. The sun. Yes, the very star that's been keeping you warm and cozy all morning now has a shadow dancing across the sky. And guess what? This shadow holds the key to measuring time in ancient Babylon. So let's dive into this ancient tradition and find out how the Babylonians used the sun's shadow to tell the time, keep appointments, and navigate their lives. It's going to be a wild ride, so buckle up and get ready to learn. The first thing you should know about Babylonian timekeeping is that they didn't have a watch or a smartphone to tell the time. They had to use a bit of ingenuity and some basic tools to figure it out. One of the most popular methods they used was called the gnomon. Basically, this was a vertical stick or obelisk that they would place in the ground or on top of a building. Then, as the sun moved across the sky, its shadow would move along the face of the gnomon, telling the time. Yeah, it might sound simple, but it was actually pretty accurate. The Babylonians were able to measure the length of each hour of the day pretty precisely, and they could even tell the time of sunrise and sunset down to the minute. It was like having a built-in alarm clock, except instead of beeping loudly in your ear, the gnomon just stood silently in the background, casting its mysterious shadow. But why did the Babylonians choose to use a stick to measure the sun's shadow? Well, it turns out that there's a really good reason behind this seemingly random choice. The Babylonians noticed that the length of a shadow cast by an object depends on the angle of the sun's rays. When the sun is high in the sky, the rays hit the object at a steep angle, casting a short shadow. But when the sun is low on the horizon, the rays hit the object at a shallow angle, casting a long shadow. By using a stick, the Babylonians could see the shadow cast by the sun more clearly and more accurately, which made it easier for them to tell the time. Plus, they could adjust the length of the stick depending on the season and the latitude of their location. For example, in the summer when the sun is higher in the sky, they would use a shorter stick. In the winter when the sun is lower in the sky, they would use a longer stick. And in different parts of the empire, they would adjust the length of the stick based on how far north or south they were located. This attention to detail and precision is what made the Babylonians such great astronomers and mathematicians. They were constantly trying to understand and predict the movements of the celestial bodies in the sky, and they used their knowledge of shadows to do just that. But the Babylonians weren't content with just measuring the time during daylight hours. They also wanted to know how to measure the time at night. After all, a lot of important events happened after the sun went down. So they developed another ingenious method using stars. Instead of using a physical object like a stick, they used the positions of the stars in the sky to tell the time. Now you may be thinking, isn't that a little bit complicated? How are you supposed to tell the time just by looking at the stars? Well, it's actually not as hard as you might think. The Babylonians were able to create a system of timekeeping that used the positions of the stars relative to each other. By watching how the stars moved in the sky, they could tell the time pretty accurately. But why did they use stars instead of, say, the moon or the planets? Well, it turns out that the stars were a better choice for timekeeping than the other celestial bodies. The moon goes through phases that change its appearance from night to night, which makes it harder to use as a reliable timekeeper. And the planets move much faster than the stars, which makes it harder to track their position accurately. But the stars, well, they were just right. They provided a consistent and reliable way to tell the time at night without having a fancy clock or watch. The Babylonians were able to create a system of timekeeping that allowed them to tell the time to within a few minutes of the actual time. And they did all of this without any technology, just by observing the natural world around them. That's pretty impressive, don't you think? But the Babylonians didn't stop there. They also developed a complex system of water clocks to supplement their other timekeeping methods. Water clocks were used throughout the ancient world, but the Babylonians took them to a whole new level. Their water clocks were incredibly precise and accurate, and they were able to use them to measure time to within a fraction of a second. To use a water clock, the Babylonians would fill a container with water and then put an object in the water that would float. As the water drained out of the container, the float would rise and fall, and the Babylonians could use this movement to measure time. But the Babylonians didn't just use water clocks to tell the time. They also used them to keep track of appointments and events. They would set the water clock to go off at a certain time, and then they would know that it was time to meet someone or start an important task. It was like having an alarm clock that wouldn't snooze, but water clocks weren't perfect. They had to be constantly filled and adjusted, and they were sensitive to changes in temperature and other factors. So the Babylonians had to be careful to maintain their water clocks properly. Despite these challenges, the Babylonians were able to use water clocks to keep track of time with incredible accuracy. So what were the Babylonians doing with all this time they were measuring so carefully? Well, it turns out they were up to all sorts of activities, both practical and fun. They used their timekeeping methods to keep track of appointments, of course, but they also used them to plan parties and festivals. They even used them to play games and tell stories. One of the most famous uses of timekeeping in ancient Babylon was during their New Year celebrations. The Babylonians would hold a huge festival to celebrate the New Year, and they would use their timekeeping methods to make sure that the festivities started and ended at the right times. They would set up giant gnomons and water clocks to make sure that the party didn't go on too long or start too early. It was like having a designated party planner, except in this case, the party planner was a bunch of ancient technology. But the Babylonians weren't just using their timekeeping methods for practical or festive purposes. They were also using them for entertainment. One popular game they played was called the shadow game, where two people would stand opposite each other and try to match their shadows using sticks or other objects. It was a fun way to pass the time and test your skills as a measure of shadows. The Babylonians also used their timekeeping methods to tell stories and entertain their children. They would tell stories about the gods and heroes of their culture, and they would use puppets and costumes to bring the stories to life. They would perform these shows at festivals and other special events, and the people of Babylon loved them. But perhaps the most impressive use of timekeeping in ancient Babylon was in the area of astronomy. The Babylonians were some of the first people in the world to keep detailed records of the positions of the stars and planets, and they used their timekeeping methods to do it. They would observe the positions of the stars at different times of the day and night, and they would record their observations in clay tablets. They were able to create some of the earliest known star maps, and they also developed the first known system of constellations. These observations and maps helped the Babylonians to understand the patterns of the night sky, and they also helped them to predict astronomical events like eclipses and comets. So there you have it, a glimpse into the fascinating world of Babylonian timekeeping. From their innovative use of the gnomon to their water clocks and their contributions to astronomy, the Babylonians were true masters of measuring time. They were able to develop some of the earliest known systems for keeping time, and they used those systems for all sorts of activities, from the practical to the fun and everything in between. So next time you look up at the sky or check the time on your phone, take a moment to appreciate the legacy of the Babylonians and their amazing feats of timekeeping. Who knows? Maybe they would have loved to have a smartphone too. All right, history buffs, that's gonna do it for our journey back to ancient Babylon. We hope you enjoyed learning about how the Babylonians kept track of time. If you did, don't forget to give us a thumbs up and subscribe for more historical adventures. And hey, if you want to keep the party going, we've got plenty more videos for you to explore. Just click on the links below and get ready to learn. Until next time, happy timekeeping and thanks for watching. So I'm curious, did you learn nothing from this episode? How does your method of telling the time compare to the Babylonians? Did they have it simpler or do we have it easier today? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Also, are you enjoying this series? Be sure to leave a cheeky comment to let me know. And remember, if you're getting value from this, hit that subscribe button. See you soon. Sweet dream.